Get the pleasure of sitting in a studio scenario once again with well-known local lady now, but we're going to find out how that came about. Kylie King, how are you?
Hi, Kev. A little intimidating, I must admit, being on the other side of the microphone, having someone else firing questions my way, but I'll do my best.
I'll try to make it as pain-free as possible. Most people would know you locally through your years at Prime 7 News, or Prime News it was back then. Let's talk your interest in journalism but sport and what brought you to Albury-Wodonga.
Yeah, well, I guess interest in journalism first off. I remember being on school holidays over summer when, you get that pressure in year 10. What do you want to do? What subjects are you going to do? And I really didn't know. And I remember watching the local news in the caravan when we were in there on holidays, and they had a female newsreader, Simone Semmons, reading the local news. And I thought, that has got to be the best job. You just rock in just before the news. I'm sure you have a team of wardrobe and makeup people, preening after you, and you just have to read a few intros to a news bulletin. How good would that job be? So in that youthful enthusiasm and imagination, I thought that'd be cool. Well, how do you get to that job? Probably a journalist. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense because I had a natural curiosity and I quite enjoyed English and loved typing and all those things. So that planted a seed. And I guess that's the thing. If you know where you want to go, you can help sort of guide yourself in that direction, because I was going to do math science subjects but switched to more the English, because teachers back then said if you do math science, you've got more options at university. So that was pretty lucky in a way then. Actually did work experience at a radio station, managed to get offered a traineeship after year 12. That was after filing records, back when they had records back in the day after school, doing little part-time jobs. Got a job as a trainee copywriter, which I figured was writing. It wasn't journalism, but it was a form of writing to deadlines and using your creativity, and eventually sort of morphed into the newsroom. Within about 3 years, through circumstances, I actually ended up being the news editor. The station relocated to another city in Traralgon, so this was Sale, Traralgon. Did that for a while, and then they had a sister station, which was a television station that had a local news service. So managed to get an opportunity with them. And you have one of those moments where you think, oh, this is fantastic. But I quickly realised that television hard news really wasn't my thing, because I used to have to cover a lot of fatal accidents, and I think there was one pivotal moment when I covered a fatal drowning. So there were 3 guys at Lakes Entrance, and their little tinny overturned, and one of them drowned, and the 2 survivors, were sort of left. And we were one of the first news crews there, and I remember the news editor saying, well, you've got to go and interview them. You've got to get the scoop. All the metro stations will be here, and we're the local news, and we really need this story. And my God, I thought, oh, God, I can't do that. And you hit that moment, you think, maybe this career I thought I wanted to do isn't actually what I want to do. Luckily, the sports reporter went on holidays and he said, why don't you fill in and do some sports stories? And which kind of made sense, because I've played a lot of sport. I think anyone that grows up in the country dabbles at something. So I filled in for him and I went, oh, this is so much more fun. People aren't dying generally in sport. So that kind of sort of set that sports journey. And Prime News in Albury were actually advertising for a sports presenter, reporter, and they actually wanted a female presenter. They had Steve Block at the time as the male newsreader, and I managed to get the job, which was terrific. And
so what year was that?
94.
Yeah.
Actually, before I got to Prime, I actually had a job interview with Channel 7 Sports World at the time, and that would have been working with Bruce McAvaney, and I'm like, oh, my Lord. Didn't get the job, but it just opened my eyes to the sporting opportunities and the different things that are out there, and like Sports Sunday and Wide World of Sports was big back in the day, so there were lots of little things to look forward to as a sports journalist to work towards.
So you get to Albury. Was that a career step in your eyes?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny because I'd never been up this neck of the woods. I grew up in Gippsland, and even when I got offered the job, I quickly had to look up, now which side is Albury and Wodonga on the river? One of them's in Victoria and one's in New South Wales. And I remember when I first came up, State of Origin was on, and I'd never covered that at all. Being a Victorian, it was AFL or nothing. So, quickly I had to get my head around, the sports that are unique to this area. But career-wise, lifestyle-wise, it was the best decision ever. I just remembered just arriving in this region, just the positive vibe that you get, it's just a beautiful part of the world, plus people are positive, friendly, welcoming, terrific sporting community. And I guess I had a very strong motorsport side of things as well, so I got to learn a lot more of that with Brad Jones and a couple of rally drivers doing a lot of things. So, Yeah, so those were I guess the years career-wise. It was certainly beneficial for me, and eventually was able to move on for a little bit.
Yeah, so where did you go to once you left the Prime News in Albury? What happened?
Well, I think when you're young, you always have these, got to get to the city, got to get to a metro station. I don't know, it's just this ambition that I think a lot of us grow up with, how far can you go? And so I'd put in applications to Melbourne and Sydney for the different networks. And the Melbourne news editor for Channel 10 rang me up one day and he said, I bet you didn't think you'd hear from me, because I'd sent him something, a good year or so ago. And he said, I always had you in mind when an opportunity came up. So yeah, Channel 10 in Melbourne, part of their sports reporting team. Stephen Quartermain was the sports presenter. The reporters at the time were Craig Hutchison, Anthony Mithen, Francis Murphy, myself. And then Christy Malthouse came a little later on, and then Tim Hodges as well, Gerard Waitley. So it was a time where I really learnt a lot, and, to be considered in that sort of calibre was really good.
You've really forged a career in sometimes fairly ruthless industry.
Yeah.
But certainly in the years that you were still being, I guess, scrutinised in your role and critiqued day in, day out with how you presented, a fairly male-dominated industry. How was that?
Yeah, I think it was a case of I just had this inner, don't muck up, don't ask stupid questions. If you're going to put yourself out there, do your research, know what you're going to ask. Don't pretend to be a know-it-all. If you don't know something of a technical nature or whatever, don't pretend you do. But there was definitely a few testing moments. It was almost like they threw the country girl in the deep end to just see whether she'd sink or swim. So my first year at Channel 10 in the sports department in Melbourne, I'd gone from covering the Morris Medal presentation for the Ovens and Murray football for Prime to the following week or two covering the Brownlow Medal preview, interviewing the likes of James Hird, Scott West, Nathan Buckley, Robert Harvey, all of those players, doing live crosses. The scrutiny was pretty big back in the day. And I think 2 days later I was doing the story on Robert Harvey winning the Brownlow Medal, going to the Carbine Club luncheon to follow up that story. But it was the same time that Stan Alves had got the sack from St Kilda Footy Club. So Craig Hutchison was off chasing that story. Where is he, trying to track him down for the follow. And I'm just innocently standing in the foyer at Crown Palladium, with the Carbine Club lunch, and Stan Alves wanders in, and I've just gone, I guess I better introduce myself and ask if he's happy to have a chat about his sacking. And he said, look, I've just arrived. He said, I've got a few people I need to see, but stay where you are and I'll come back. So, okay. So myself and my cameraman, staying on my spot. He said he'd come back. Meantime, he's worked his way through the room and the media scrum started to arrive, and that was probably my first experience of the media scrum in Melbourne. So he stopped to talk to someone, and this almost, 180-degree media scrum pack has arrived with tripods being assembled and journos all gathering in a half circle, waiting to throw microphones and ask questions. And then I thought, do I go over with them or do I stay where I am? He said he's coming back, but am I just being a naive country girl? Should I go and join the throng over there? But to his credit, he walked straight past them and came back over to where I was standing. They then clumbered and joined me, but I always remembered, I thought, wow, that could have gone really pear-shaped. I could have missed that whole interview of him. And so I never forgot that. That was a really credible thing for Stan Alves. I thought with a new girl on the block, someone he'd never met before, coming over to do an interview, which was great.
Could it have been credibility for you? Could it have been the trust that you built from that point? Like, do you find that's key to your job, is being able to have an open conversation and perhaps sometimes ask, even though it's only sport and not life or death, ask some of those harder questions?
It is tricky. Another one, Mick Malthouse. Oh, wow, he's always very intimidating, although he was great later on. I think they test you, and once they get to know what you're about, they suss you out. But one of the biggest, I think the most well-qualified person to cover AFL footy in Melbourne is someone that's familiar with sports injuries, because that's what you're doing half the time. You're watching a training session, trying to work out if someone's going to be named in the team that weekend. So you spend a lot of time at footy grounds watching training, and then, of course, you're interviewing the coach. And I was watching him, and Simon Prestigiacomo at the time for Collingwood was under a bit of an injury cloud, and he wasn't really going in hard during the training session. And it was just before a finals match, or I think at the time, and Mick Malthouse addressed the media, and I asked the question, and I said, Is Simon Prestigiacomo, is he going to be right to play for the weekend? I noticed he didn't sort of really go in hard in that training session, and he's stared me down and he's gone, and how often are you coming here to sit down and pay close attention to what Simon Prestigiacomo is doing in my training sessions? And I just was like a deer in the headlights. And I went, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? He didn't play. And I was right. And I just went, wow, God, there's a lesson. Stick to your guns a little bit. Be brave enough to ask the right question, even if you do cop a spray, but do it in the right way, you know.
Let's talk about what I know is a passion, and he's still quite almost a full-time, even though it's fortnightly or sometimes 3 or 4 weeks apart. The V8 Supercars television, or what's now Supercars coverage. You've been involved in that for quite some time now, haven't you? Through it's been across different networks and different versions.
Yeah. Because when I was at Channel 10 in the sports department, it was terrific. I was working on the Australian Open tennis, AFL grand finals, regular events, cricket, golf, you name it. I got to cover it, which was terrific. But at the end of the day, you were still only really putting together a 1.5-minute news story. There wasn't a heap of creativity involved. So once you get to a point that you'd done that for a while, I thought, well, what's the next great challenge? And I'd always wanted to work on a Sports World or a Sports Sunday and write feature-length sort of sports stories. And the only program that Channel 10 had at the time was RPM, which was it's returned now, but back in the day it was quite a fully produced motorsports program. And luckily enough, I was able to sort of weasel my way in there and become one of the reporters, and which meant more a freelance sort of contractor. So left the newsroom, did a bit of that. And it was perfect timing because they got the rights to the Formula One Grand Prix, so I got to work on that coverage. They had the Australian Rally Championship, so I got to work on that coverage, as well as go to every supercar round and put together really good feature stories for RPM. Did a little bit of producing for that as well in Sydney, filling in. And then you're right, sort of networks change, things morph. Instead of Channel 10 owning the rights, Supercars Media wanted to run the rights for their own television coverage, so they brought it in-house and then subcontracted to whoever won the rights. Luckily enough, I pretty well followed it for most of the time through Channel 7 and now through Channel 10 and Fox Sports. So luckily enough to still be involved, wearing many different hats these days, but still very much involved.
And you can still do that from Albury-Wodonga, the best part.
Oh, yeah, it's so good. Having an airport here really makes it so easy to fly everywhere. Just got back from the Gold Coast where they raced off to New Zealand in a couple of weeks. Yeah, just terrific. I mean, in my early days with RPM, when I did move back to Albury, because I'd done the city thing and they were happy for me to come back to Albury and still be one of their team, I used to have to actually drive to Melbourne to their studios to record my voiceovers though. Whereas now, you know, you can easily record them because of the internet and all the different file sharing services. So that's made life easier. You know, I can record it like we are here and send it to the editors in Sydney and the story can be produced. So that's been helpful.
For anybody aspiring to enter television or be a journalist now, do you think it's changed substantially from when you came through?
It absolutely has changed substantially, but I think the craft is still there and I think the learnings are still there. I think these days you probably need to learn other skills that I wish I did know how to do, but I'm trying to learn as I go along, which is a little bit of camera work, a little bit of video editing, the ability to be digital savvy, which are skills I'm sort of learning a little bit myself. I think the skills are definitely there in journalism. I think that the traditional newspapers that a lot of journalists aspire to, I guess some of the landscapes change, but I think whatever skill you learn as a journalist, it's a skill you can take anywhere through your working life, whether that be in public relations or marketing or whatever it is. And I think with the explosion of digital media outlets, they all need content, they all need journalists, they all need people with the ability to write and do video and edit and graphic design and social media. I think it's different, but I think it's still really cool.
What brought you back to Albury-Wodonga? You mentioned before that when you first came, you're obviously regional growing up in Traralgon, and all that was very regional at the time. It's almost an extension of city now, but what made you come back to Albury-Wodonga? I
think you're right. I think it was this welcoming vibrancy. The climate was terrific. I think it's got a great airport. has that cosmopolitan feel without being too cityfied. You can still get to the city if you need to. And I think you spent so much of my early career wanting to get to Melbourne or Sydney, Melbourne, Sydney, Melbourne, Sydney. Got to Melbourne, did it. After a few years, I went, oh, okay, I've kind of done that now. Do I really want to live here for the next however many years of my life? And I went, not really. Melbourne's terrific. I love a lot of elements of it, but I miss things like just, ringing up a mate and catching up for a coffee 5 minutes later, or, catching up for lunch. What are you doing? You really had to get the diary out in Melbourne because I live 5 suburbs away, and you've got to schedule traffic and people's time frames. And but now I get to enjoy the city when I do go there. Same with the supercars, you get to go to Darwin and Townsville and all these terrific locations, but it's terrific to come back here. So I think you're right. I think it's got this beautiful, energised, vibrant, cosmopolitan lifestyle that really suits me, but it's probably a bigger market than what I grew up in, so I didn't really want to go to my hometown of Sale or Traralgon, where I'd spent some time. That didn't particularly appeal to me to want to be there, but this definitely, I don't know. They say, when you found your spot where you need to be, and this seems to be it.
What does Kylie King do for a hobby? What does she do in her spare time when she's not covering the supercars and all the sort of media side of things that you still have commitments with? What do you do with spare time? How do you unwind?
I love sport still. For years I used to always play Saturday tennis. Now it's turned into golf, and I think the first time I was on a golf course, I thought, how cool is this? It's the middle of summer and the grass on my lawn at home's dead, but hey, this is beautiful. I'm going to walk around this golf course and be energised. Too bad if I can't hit the ball. This is fun. So I love that. Luckily enough, I live out of town on a few acres, so, I'll just love to get up and walk the dogs of a morning and, I don't know, water the garden and potter around and things like that. But, yeah, probably sport's still up there.
What's the greatest bit of advice anyone's ever given you or you've heard? Is there like a motto or a pearl of wisdom that you just love?
Look, I remember going to Tom O'Toole, hearing him speak for the first time. Such an energetic bloke. I mean, everyone pretty well knows him locally, but if you've ever heard him talk, it's just hard keeping up with the guy. But geez, he's got some pearlers. And I remember one thing. He said something about, the dream takers are everywhere. There are dream takers out there ready to bring you down. He goes, sometimes you're even married to them, but there are dream takers everywhere, and just be wary of it, and just don't surround yourself with them and don't allow them to bring you down, And also, what is going to fuel your campfire with decisions you make in life? Is it going to add fuel to your inner campfire and get it roaring, or is it really going to sort of put it out a bit? So often when I think of decisions, I sort of think of things like that. Is it going to fuel me up? Does this feel great? Is it something I feel passionate about, or is it something that's a little bit not really me? So, and also other advice in, I think, a lot of basic stuff in not fearing change or not fearing decisions. I think we're so caught up with a lot of fear that it can paralyse you. But I think in any decision you make, it's almost like you can't make a wrong decision, because whatever decision you make, you'll either continue on where you hoped or thought you'd be, or it won't work out. But hey, you've learned something along the way, or if you hadn't done that, that wouldn't have happened. When I left Channel 10, for example, and ended up doing motorsport, well, they got the AFL rights the next time. And, Christy Malthouse and Gerard Whateley and all the gang were working on the live AFL coverage. And I went, oh, man, that would have been so much fun to do. But if I hadn't have left, I wouldn't have ended up in the motorsport sphere, which I am equally enjoying. So, yeah, I think they're things that I stick about, not to just trust that decisions that you make, you'll learn from them. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. Don't sweat the small stuff, and try and be positive and optimistic and humble.
While on decisions, what do you think the greatest decision you've ever made is in life, not just professionally? Coming back to Albury-Wodonga?
Yeah, that's been awesome. Yeah, definitely. And I think going away helped, because then I think when you get away from a situation, it makes you remember what you appreciated. And that's probably something I think about a lot, to remind yourself to be grateful for the things that are in your life. And I remember being challenged to write down 50 things you're grateful for. And you think, oh, well, you do the obvious, your family, your friends, your health, your job, and then your fitness. Okay, still got another 40 things to go. And it really makes you think of some of those things you take for granted, like hearing the magpie's warble of a morning, or, just the ability to, to have a hot bath in the middle of winter and, have a roaring fire and snuggle up in front of it. And I think sometimes you get so caught up in things. So I try to practice reminding myself of 5 to 10 things you're grateful for every now and again before the day's out.
Bit of gratitude. bit of
gratitude,
mindfulness.
bit of that.
It's very on trend at the moment, so it could be part of your success, I guess, Kylie. What's a tough decision you've had to make?
There was a time when I worked at Prime News that I was offered a job with Win News as well. So I was the Prime sports presenter and I was offered the Win sports presenting job out of Ballarat, but that was like a statewide job. Prime one was very much the Albury market, and I went, what do I do? What do I do? So initially I took the Win job, but after a week I thought, oh no, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I sort of felt like a traitor or something. I know it's really weird. And anyway, so I ended up reneging on that. So that was nearly, I don't think it would have turned out any worse or better, but I just thought ethically it probably didn't sit well with me at the time. But yeah, ended up staying at Prime, and we ended up creating a sports show, which was terrific, which had I left, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So yeah, and I'm glad the decision to be a journalist turned out right when I finally discovered sport. Otherwise, that might have been a really bad decision, doing a TV news story and continuing to do hard-hitting, sad stories, which really isn't in my nature.
Do you have any regrets so far in life?
I'm not one for that, for regrets, because I think at the time you might think it's a regret, but I think 5 years from now you go, oh, that's why that happened. So probably not, no, not that I can really think or dwell on.
Let's get on to one of your latest sort of career movements, bought a cafe. How did that come about?
When I do the motorsport rounds, because the TV crew, like Bathurst and the Gold Coast, like there's 350 crew work on those events, and it's amazing. But most of them do come from Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, Gold Coast. So, you know, you'd often run into other people, oh, where are you based? Albury-Wodonga. Same with motorsport drivers. Oh, where are you based? Albury-Wodonga. Oh, it'd be almost this, like they're taken back. Oh, why? Why do you live there? What's there? And I think they associate Winton with Albury-Wodonga, and Winton, whenever the supercars are on, it's usually miserable and wet and cold because they have it in May. But so they associate, I think, Albury-Wodonga with that as well. So I find myself being quite sort of parochial and defensive of the region. So there was a little bit of that, and it gets you thinking about all the things we've got to be grateful for living here. And then I sort of noticed, you know, in the cities there's the broadsheets and the urban lists, little digital publications that I guess show the cultural vibe of the cities with the restaurants and the events and food and wine and creative people doing really cool things. And I thought we don't have that in our market. And I thought, well, it's not like I'm printing, you know, big printing costs to do a magazine. I thought, well, why don't I create an online publication and I'll just pop some stories up from time to time when the mood takes me in between my other work. And had a photographer, Trudy, who's an amateur photographer, but she loves, you know, taking photos. So her and I just pop off for a day and do some things, and before you knew it, it turned into a publication that people were really appreciating and enjoying, and it's like, oh wow, okay, this could be a business. So it's kind of sort of morphing into that direction at the moment, and yeah, see where it ends up.
Yeah, exciting times ahead. If there was a movie done on your life, Kylie King, who would play Kylie?
Oh, I'd like to see Angelina Jolie because there's obvious physical similarities. Not. That's really tricky. Isn't it tricky who you'd get to play?
Mine would be Rowan Atkinson. Can you see it? I don't know.
Give us your best Mr. Bean face. Come on. Actually, Rowan Atkinson, that was funny. It's just to have, because with my motorsport and my PR and my journalism, I've actually got some PR clients, and I don't even know how this came about, but I got this really weird request from Paramount Pictures to do, and I think it's because they must have looked at my website or something, but because of my sporting background plus my PR background, they asked me to coordinate Rowan Atkinson's appearance at the Collingwood Football Club for his Mr. Bean holiday movie, to coordinate the media appearance for him for that. So that was pretty out there. So we had to coordinate, you know, how the skit would work and work out where the TV cameras would assemble for the media and where he'd come and what drills he might do with some of the players. And yeah, so there you go. That's a bit of left of centre story.
Well, lucky I mentioned Rowan Atkinson to get that story out of you. Any other brushes with fame besides the obviously sporting ones? Any other interesting stories like that people might not read?
Yeah, I know. You sort of forget about that. Look, Valentino Rossi is, I mean, I know he's sporty, but terrific guy. Like, we were doing a live coverage of MotoGP, and he was just on the fence just watching the 125s going around, and we were doing live stuff, and I was pit reporting, and I said, hey, Valentino's down here. Normally you've got a organise and book in advance all your interviews. And I said, do you want, if he's keen, do you want me to just have a chat to him while he's out here watching? And the producer's like, yes. So, just had a chat with Valentino, and he was happy to chat in that wonderful accent that he has.
Yeah.
And, just easygoing. He was jumping on the back of one of his PR people and riding him like a horse and doing crazy things. And next minute he gets on a bike and races as though it's all serious. So he was pretty funky. But no, most of mine have definitely been sports-related people for sure.
Any awkward, like other than the Mick Malthouse one that you mentioned earlier, any awkward or terrible sort of interviews or people that you've come across?
No, that was probably pretty confronting. I think it's the look. It's the intimidating look that he has. But back in my day, Kevin Sheedy, he was always creative and interesting in press conferences at Windy Park, and so he was pretty funny. He was out there. You didn't know if he was telling you the truth or spinning you a yarn and talking about aliens and all sorts of things and picking on the umpires in weird, creative ways that you had to work out what he was on about. So no real awkward ones. But I think they generally were very inclusive and respectful, even though I was a female and you talked about some of the barriers. I think, once they got to know you, what you're about, they were pretty good.
If you could be anywhere in the world tomorrow, don't worry about money, where would you be? Who would you have with you?
Have to have my husband, wouldn't I? That's you get in trouble if you didn't say that. And the fact that we don't see a lot of each other anyway, because I traipse around with my job and he does with his as well. Like, got back from the Gold Coast and then he's off with his work today. So never been to the Great Barrier Reef. I think that'd be pretty cool. I've been to Townsville for the supercars. I think that'd be a great place to explore a bit more. I've dabbled in a little bit of overseas travel, but happy to dabble in it again. But I think what we've got in Australia is pretty cool. Pretty lucky I get to see most of it. But funnily enough, even the humble old Lakes Entrance where I used to go as a kid still brings back that nostalgic memory. So perhaps a nice day, eating some nice, Lakes Entrance local prawns on a nice summer's day, kicking back with a cold drink. That'd be pretty cool.
With your husband?
With my husband, of course.
Achievable too. You really don't have to worry about finances to go to Lakes Entrance, do you?
I know. I went to Abu Dhabi. That was pretty cool. We went to Abu Dhabi with the supercars and we've been to Shanghai. So we've been to some pretty cool places. But the Abu Dhabi, just to tell you a funny story with that, because we did a pre-publicity trip to Abu Dhabi ahead of the supercars round, and Vodafone were then the sponsors of the Triple Eight team. So Craig Lowndes was on this trip and also Lee Holdsworth was on it. And I was in the car with Lee Holdsworth and the tour guide. We were going from one place to the next for some photo opportunities, and Craig Lowndes was in the following car. But because they had free phone service because of their Vodafone thing, they kept texting Lee Holdsworth. So every time he was receiving a text message, he was copying the cost of the call. Oh. So they just kept the whole trip texting, and he's awake. And anyway, he wound the window down and he went to give them the rude finger, and the PR guy with us, just slapped his arm down, and he says, you do not do that in Abu Dhabi because you might get your finger chopped off.
Oh, wow.
So that was, I'm like, oh, serious. Yeah, totally different world, but they reckon there's like zero crime rate because things are pretty strict over there. But yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Definitely makes you appreciate Albury-Wodonga, doesn't it?
I know, that's pretty funny.
Put the bird willy-nilly around it.
I know. I thought, take home with the driver with one less finger. That'd be helpful.
5 years from now, what are you doing?
5 years goes around pretty quick. I sort of looked at what I was doing 5 years ago, and same old same. Look, if I'm still doing supercars production and TV stuff, that would be absolutely awesome. And look, as you get older, you in television, you're not always doing as much on camera stuff. It's not. It can be a young person's world. So I've always tried to diversify my skills as I've got older. So I've done a lot of producing. So I produce the international highlights for supercars when they go overseas. I piece together the Saturday highlights. I produce the Channel 10 highlights when Channel 10 have only got that 1 hour worth of highlights. So I'm doing a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. But then by the same token, I learned a new skill. I've been doing some commentary on the big screen coverage for some support categories, which I never thought I'd be considered myself as a commentator. So if I can still be dabbling in a little bit of live TV, and the Supercars is awesome because it's a live event. Every round we go to, it's this massive production that just pops up out of nowhere, and you're creating television, and there's a real adrenaline rush associated with that. If I could still be doing that, that'd be great. If Border Cafe, this little online publication, we can hire a few extra journalists, writers, video people, perhaps. That'd be really fun to really expose. You've got someone up my sleeve over there, so it'd be really good to grow that little publication, because I think media is really tough, and you hear the sad stories about shrinking media and not the resources and things going to Sydney and Melbourne. But I think, if we can look after our own backyard and foster this little product that we've got with Border Cafe, and other people can collaborate and join along for the ride, I'd be pretty proud if that can sort of take off in 5 years and still be doing good things.
Well, Kylie King, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I didn't start the interview this way because I thought I'd leave it till the end, but I used to watch you presenting your sport each weeknight while I was still at school. So I don't think you've aged a bit. So well done, whatever the secret is. That. Maybe we'll say that for episode 2 of Kylie King's journey, the secret to the youthful appearance to stay in television as long as you have. Well done on that career, and all the best for your Border Cafe. And
thanks so much.
Thanks for spending some time in the studio for your journey.
Oh, phew, sigh of relief. Cue the champagne, please. Thanks, Kev.